Hey everyone, Pugs here with 2 new reviews for y'all. Today I'm covering New Fish in Town and Love That Squid. 2 Squidward focused episodes, which I guess now that I'm thinking about it, we haven't had too many of those this season, have we? At the very least, we haven't had many in this second half of season 7, I think. I could be wrong about that, but what's the fun in actually going and checking on what I say? Let me just make unsubstantiated assertions based on vibes. Anyway, as always, thank you all for watching the video today. I appreciate every single one of you, and this is your first reminder that I have a Q&A video coming out soon to celebrate the 3K subscriber milestone, and I need your questions. The video I made for gathering questions is linked in the description, and you've got until July 23rd to get those questions in. And now, let's just get right into it. I gotta say, whenever I think of New Fish in Town these days, I think of Rube. Yeah, the character from the newer seasons who loves saying amazing. I don't really know why Harold, the one-off character featured in this episode, reminds me of Rube, but he does. Outside of that, I think the best way I could describe this episode, as it exists in my memory, is somewhat unremarkable. It's not forgettable, but there's no particular reason for me to remember it either, other than it being an episode of the show that I've decided to latch onto for life, that is. So, I can't believe that this episode begins with Patrick being a no-good landlord. For shame. Who knew Patrick would be a class traitor? I'm just kidding. Mostly. Okay, but in all seriousness, I think that the plot of New Fish in Town is pretty interesting, or more accurately, this setup is interesting. Though the plot itself is interesting too, since it features a new character and the potential of shaking up some dynamics, but I digress. So having Patrick rent out his front yard here is pretty neat and cool, and it's pretty unlike any episode that we've seen thus far, so I'm already intrigued. And even better, it brings Patrick over to the adult side of the child-adult line, which is always a win in my books. It's kind of funny that Patrick's little scheme to make a quick buck here is perfect for the tiny house movement. I like watching videos about tiny houses, I think they're very cool. Okay, let me stop before this becomes a real tangent. Right before I move on to the next scene, though, I gotta say that I like this bit of banter between SpongeBob, Patrick, and Squidward, especially the part where Squidward pulls out his planner. I don't know, jokes like that are always great to see. Like Patrick's to-do list for doing nothing in the pink purloiner, or SpongeBob's go-to-work to-do list from Something Smells. It's great for my literal-minded brain, I guess. So, after SpongeBob and Patrick go to Jellyfish Fields, someone takes up the offer of Patrick's front yard, and at first Squidward is dismissive of this dude until he realizes that he sounds exactly like someone that he'd want to be around, someone with some quote-unquote culture. And I really like that this episode gives Squidward someone else to bounce off of, which keeps things interesting in an episode about the goings-on of Conch Street. Not that this kind of plot is automatically boring, in fact it is rarely boring, but you know what I mean. However, there is one thing I don't like about this plot, which becomes clear when Howard reveals that he cannot stand jellyfishers and bubble blowers, aka the exact type of people SpongeBob and Patrick are, which means that this plot is one of those plots where one character tries to hide something from another for a whole episode. And I'm pretty sure I've discussed this before, but this is a kind of plot that just really doesn't work for me. I can still like an episode featuring this plot, but it just depends on how the plot is handled and how many moments of secondhand embarrassment it tries to squeeze in there. This episode, thankfully, does not squeeze in very many. Squidward proceeds to go to extreme lengths to ensure that Harold does not see SpongeBob and Patrick, with these measures ranging from distraction to fence building to wall building to literally sewing SpongeBob and Patrick's mouths shut. His desperation to hold on to this one sense of quote-unquote normalcy is entertaining and compelling, in that we know that he is going to ultimately fail, a foregone conclusion since all the way back in Opposite Day. Eventually, Squidward just pushes SpongeBob and Patrick's houses off of a cliff, which is hilarious, and this is followed by the equally hilarious diving gag. I don't know who thought of this diving gag, but whoever did, I need you to get a raise ASAP. It's just so funny to me. Unfortunately, despite Squidward's efforts and his palpable desperation, Howard sees SpongeBob and Patrick, and when he tries to confront them, he gets corrupted by their foolishness. Yet another example of a miserable grump introducing some joy and whimsy into his life, which is something that our resident miserable grump Squidward cannot stand for. And so since Squidward can only handle SpongeBob and Patrick in his life, Harold has got to go, and so Squidward causes his house to go rolling off the cliff as well, making Harold go diving like the rest. The ending of this episode is hilarious, as it seems happiness is just forever out of reach for Squidward, just like this bubble that he is unable to pop. And of course, he's gotta get his universal justice, so in chasing the bubble, he jumps off of the cliff too, hilariously being the third entry in that gag. New Fish in Town was a pretty good episode. Yeah, it uses the plot structure that I'm not a fan of, which does cause a few blows to my enjoyment of this one, but other than that, I really enjoyed everything that this episode had to offer. I also think it's a very understated episode, I guess, taking place in just one location and having some pretty subdued humor compared to some of the other episodes of the season. And so, in a way, despite this episode being kinda unremarkable, this episode stands out from the others by being so understated. So I suppose I can consider this episode to be yet another hidden gem of Season 7, a hidden gem that'll be placed in my great tier, where it comes in with a score of 8.4 out of 10. Alright, I know what y'all are thinking. Love That Squid is an episode all about romance, so Pugs is gonna hate it, right? Wrong. Kind of. Okay, see, for once I don't actually hate the romance that's present in this episode, and that's largely because it involves Squidward, not Patrick, or especially SpongeBob, and Squidward is a character I can tolerate in a romantic plot a whole lot more than those two. Now, to be clear, I don't necessarily care about the romance plot of this episode either, but it's in the sense that I don't care about Squidward's romantic life at all. However, I will admit that since this show is so rarely, thank God, dabbling in these romantic waters, this episode stands out as pretty much the only one I can think of at the moment that focuses on Squidward trying to find romantic love. Considering how self-absorbed Squidward is, I'm almost surprised that he even thinks about that. But I suppose that both the previous episode and this one focus on Squidward's desire for companionship, period. And, you know, that's really neat that these sister episodes pair in that way. Love when there's a connecting thread like that. Another thing I like about this episode is how Squidward and SpongeBob act like real bona fide friends. Like, Squidward's gushing about his crush to SpongeBob, and SpongeBob helps him get ready for his date. There's none of the usual hostility on Squidward's part, for the most part, and I really think it's nice to see. It's wholesome as hell, too. I always love seeing these two work together like this, which I've for sure said before. Pretty sure I even said it in my review of Krusty Dogs, which was not that long ago. And then there are a couple things that I don't like about Love That Squid. First of all, I'm not a huge fan of the trope where a character sputters and stumbles and stutters when they do not usually do that when talking to their crush. It just gets frustrating after a while. Krusty Love is an example of this trope being done well, and this episode is not an example of that, and it goes on for entirely too long. So long, in fact, that my secondhand embarrassment meters begin to rise exponentially. So now that's another connecting factor between the sister episodes here, though a much less pleasant one than the first. Thankfully for all of us, SpongeBob saves the day during this segment of the episode, and in general, he's just such a good wingman, really hyping up Squidward, but not too much. Another thing I don't like about this episode is that although the idea of this episode is decently interesting, the execution kind of leaves a bit to be desired. Like, I don't know about y'all, but I would have liked to actually see Squidward on the date, rather than spend so much time on his practice date with SpongeBob. That part of the episode is like a low good level of quality at best, because it's not really funny even if it is somewhat enjoyable. At least SpongeBob gives Squidward some pretty decent advice, although he's also very annoying about it. Annoying in-universe, to be clear, although it does somewhat bleed into the viewing experience as well. Patrick's minor involvement in this episode is admittedly pretty funny, so that helps things along here, although by this point it's been like 3 to 4 minutes of this practice date stuff. After Squidward snaps at SpongeBob, he turns and finds that Squilvia saw the whole thing. His immediate resignation to his fate is pretty funny, and I love that as it turns out, Squilvia is into that. Like I've said before, it's always nice to see Squidward win every once in a while. If only they made Squilvia a recurring character. I think I would have appreciated that, even if I don't care for romance. However, according to Vincent Waller on Twitter, it appears Squilvia is gone for good. Sorry, Squidward. Love That Squid was a pretty good episode. It was definitely a lot better than it could have been, let's just put it that way, but it also wasn't as good as it could have been either, with most of the episode consisting of the practice date, which wasn't that entertaining other than a few moments. The enjoyability of these 11 minutes goes down considerably. But there was a lot of good in this episode too. I can't ignore that. So that is why this episode is going to be put in my good tier, where it comes in with a score of 7.8 out of 10. As always, I'll be ending this video with some closing thoughts of mine. I don't really have a whole bunch. I guess the first thing I'll say is I'm sorry if I sound kind of weird in this video and also the next, since I record at the same time. I kind of hurt my tongue real bad, long story, and so talking is a bit off and kind of painful. I mean, like I did numb it so I could talk for this long without it hurting too bad, but the numbing also has its own host of alterations to the way I speak, so can't win for losing. What else can I say? Really, my mind is blank when it comes to these two episodes. They just exist. They're good. I've made that clear. So I guess that means I don't really have any closing thoughts outside of the fact that somehow season 7 is almost over and done with. Just one more pair of episodes to review. And I think that's a decent enough segue into the part where I say that this is your second reminder to get your questions in for the Q&A. Seriously, I'm going to be bothering y'all about this in the videos that come out while the asking period is open. So do it by July 23rd. Thank you. And with that, I'll be closing things out here, and I'll see y'all in the next review.